You've watched the video of the tabernacle tour, and now we're looking at a map of it. So when we did the tour, we came in this front curtain. We saw a couple things before you got into the tent of meeting, the actual building here. So we saw an altar where you sacrifice animals, and then we saw a basin or a laver, which is where you wash your hands, okay? So we have sacrifice, and then we are cleansed, and then as priests were allowed to come into this part of the temple. And there's the lampstand, which is also called a menorah, which you might have heard when you've talked about Hanukkah in the Jewish tradition. The table of showbread or shewbread. Okay, and this is where there were 12 loaves of bread, one for each tribe of Israel. And then here's the altar of incense. This is an altar where worship takes place. So this altar is sacrifice. This altar is worship. And then here you have the curtain. Oh, where is that here? What number is curtain? Interesting. Curtain. And this was a big, thick curtain. And only one priest could come into the Holy of Holies, the most holy place. And he could only go in there one time a year. That was on the Day of Atonement. And he would go to the Ark of the Covenant. Now, you are going to cut out these items and you're going to glue them where they go. You know what things look like now because you've seen them. So we have, of course, the Ark of the Covenant. This is the altar of incense because it's a smaller altar. There's our menorah or lampstand. There's the showbread table. Here is the basin to wash your hands, and this is the altar of burnt offering, the sacrificial altar. So cut these out, put them where they go on the map. And now let's talk a little bit about what some of these things mean. So some Christians actually find this part of the Bible, the book of Leviticus, to be sort of a boring part with a lot of really weird things. I am not one of those people. I find the book of Leviticus to be so interesting. And when we look at the tabernacle, we see some things that can teach us so much about who God is and about who Jesus is. So let's start talking about the altar of sacrifice. The altar of burnt offering was the first altar. It was outside. And that is where animals would be sacrificed. They would be killed because people had sinned. So they would sacrifice the animals, and then a priest would take a coal, sort of like a burning piece, from that altar and take it in to the holy place and use that fire to make the incense burn inside the holy place. So he took the fire from the sacrifice to burn incense. Now, there's a story about a priest one time, a couple of priests, who thought, I don't need to use that specific fire. I'm just going to use whatever fire I want. I'm just going to light a match, that kind of thing, to make the incense altar burn. And God killed them because they used the wrong kind of fire. And sometimes we go, oh my goodness, that seems really crazy. But the holy place, and especially the holiest place, the most holy place, they were so special and so close to God that you had to do things absolutely perfectly in order to even get near God. And if you didn't, you would die. And we see that theme all over the Old Testament. If you get too close to God and you did not do it properly, you die. So much so that on that one day of the year, when that one priest would get to go into the most holy place and make and put the blood of the sacrifice on the Ark of the Covenant, they would put bells at the bottom of his robes so that they could hear if he was still moving around. And if he stopped moving around, they also had a rope tied to his waist, because if he died in there, no one was going to walk in after him. It was too dangerous. They would die too. So they would pull his dead body out. This is crazy. But you need to understand how obvious it was to these people that you don't go in here or you will die. Okay? So we have an altar of burnt offering, and the only way you're allowed to offer worship on the altar of incense is first through sacrifice, which tells us something in our own faith, that if we have not gone to God through Jesus, who is the sacrifice, we can't worship him yet. Okay, if we have not believed in Jesus as our sacrifice and as our Savior, then we don't get to worship yet. Sacrifice comes before worship. So that's why if you are not a Christian, you can't worship God yet. Sacrifice comes before worship. All right. We are going to talk more later on about some of the really interesting things and about how some of these things point us to Jesus. For today, though, let's get a good picture in your minds of what the tabernacle looked like. Now, this was not the temple. The temple is a building that is like an actual structure. It stays in one spot. The tabernacle was a tent, and it was designed to move around. And the people who were in charge of moving it around and taking care of it and doing all of the offerings were the Levites. Levi, one of the sons of Israel, and all of his descendants took care of the tabernacle. And they earned that right because after Moses came down from the mountain, do you remember this part? And he saw that Aaron had made this golden calf. He said, "Who's with me? Who will run around and kill people?" Do you remember who it was who decided that, yes, we are going to kill people for you? It was the Levites. So they received this special honor because they were the only ones who stood up and said, yes, we know that this idol worship is wrong and we're going to do something about it. So this is why they were the tribe who is in charge of the tabernacle. All right, I've given you a ton of information. I hope I haven't totally overwhelmed you today, but I do hope that you'll picture the tabernacle, and I hope that beyond everything, you will remember that the people knew, even the priests, they could not go into the holiest place or they would die, okay? It was that simple. They were terrified of it because there were times when people did things wrong and they died. Leave you there today on that very happy ending. I'll see you next week, guys.